Good afternoon. This is Dr. Craig Stern of Pharma Pharmaceutical Consultants and ProData Analytics. We're a little bit late today due to some calls and client calls that we've had. We wanted to let you know that what we're trying to do is, frankly, kind of experimental. We are scientists, so we deal with experiment, and we're talking a little bit about research that's going on because at its base, analytics is profoundly influenced by questions that we ask, which is the most important part of what we do, not just the answers. If we ask the wrong questions, then we effectively come up with answers that either don't have a lot of need or don't have a lot of application to whatever question that we're asking. I do want to identify that we publish all the time, and you can certainly look at the California Pharmacist Journal website. We have some new clinical practice capsules there written by some of our interns and edited by me so that you can see some good capsules about treatment of particular diseases and conditions. I want to try today to talk about some of the things going on in the literature that we think are interesting. And then at other times, we want to try and talk about some other particular news. One thing that's very important, it's coming out in all the news media, and I think it's important that we address it, is that there's this whole issue about manufacturers and the cost of drugs and the issue of inflating the cost of drugs and what that means to all of us, both patients and health plans, PBMs and everyone else. And the argument has come about where the pharmaceutical companies have identified that it really isn't their issue, it's more of a health plan and PBM issue. The health plans and PBMs have come back and said, no, it's more of a pharmaceutical company issue. And then everybody gets into the argument about the actual cost that's listed is not the same as the rebates and what the actual net cost is. Bottom line in this regard is that patients are now involved. In the past, it may have been where there was a defined copay, and so a patient only knew what the cost of the drug was based on a particular copay, perhaps a coinsurance. But now, especially with the cost of drugs and especially with deductibles, it's very important that the member is involved and they see how much the cost of these drugs are and what they're going to do about it. Well, everybody is involved here, and so it's unfair to identify one person or another. I don't have a particular favorite in this. What we do have to identify is that manufacturers are certainly increasing the price of drugs, and now Allergan today has identified that they're going to link the price of drugs to a particular inflation on a yearly basis and not based on some sort of a formula that they're busy using based on profit margin. That's an important issue. Manufacturers that are dealing with it from a profit margin are obviously looking at it in a different way, and they are going to be scrutinized strongly, whether it's by government or whether it's by individuals as to what they'll do. But it's also true that rebates and the monies that are held by PBMs and health plans are also a significant factor, and everybody has to look in that regard. This is a transition. I've certainly written about it. Others have done so as well, that we're in the middle of a world where people are moving from non-transparency to transparency. And as more and more people find out what the cost of drugs are, then the actual reason for the cost inflation becomes a matter where everybody's going to talk about it, everybody has to address it, and that will require, in some cases, legislative issues, in other cases, competition from different manufacturers, and clearly in medications where there is no competition, there's going to be a good deal of argument about inflation, cost of drugs, and how much is the manufacturer getting in a profit premium, how much is a PBM getting, how much is the health plan getting, et cetera, as people look at that and decide whether it's affordable for them or not. So I think we need to be, not trivialize this process, that it's purely one issue or another. Clearly manufacturers have have an issue involved, but so do PBMs and so do health plans. And the notion that just one group is at fault is trivializing the entire issue about what goes on. At the end of the day, it's what somebody has to get into their wallet and pay for a given drug, and that's really what this cost will be. And that's this whole argument of what's going to happen with transparency, is everybody finds out how much money is being kept by different individuals in different parts of the stream. Let me move on from that to some of the issues. There's an interesting issue that came out in Science in the latter part of 2015 that was more kind of suggestive than actually data, but it does indicate that there may be an indication for these things over time, and that is that the bacteria or gut bugs are going to influence the effectiveness of immune therapy in cancer. It may very well be, and it hasn't been reproduced. It certainly hasn't been done and validated by other centers, and that's terribly important when someone comes out with an association, but it's not been validated. And that association is that we may be giving probiotics to people on immune therapy in order to maintain some sort of adjunctive therapy in order to help them with gut flora. It's an important issue and one that we address. The other part is something that came out of the American College of Physicians, and that was something that also came out at the very end of last year, and it has to deal with the fact of general guidelines for prescribing generic medications. The issue about whether you prescribe brand or generic, or whether you take brand or generic, is a large issue. It's been argued about a lot in the media. It's been argued a lot about in social media, etc. But the real issue here is, if someone is taking a generic drug, you're getting the same benefit as someone who took a brand drug. And at the end of the day, it is also true that most of the brand name manufacturers also own or have influence over generic manufacturers. So the issue is not just that I'm a branded manufacturer and I dissociate myself from generic manufacturers. In fact, I am manufacturing both the brand and the generic. And so we're not dealing with products that are totally different. The FDA has certainly weighed in and has identified that they're the same. There are arguments about some of the time release products, because there's arguments about whether one time release dosage form is different from another time release dosage form. But whether it's Medicare and Medicare Part D, whether it's Medicaid in all the states, whether it's private insurance, whether it's pharmacology, at the end of the day, most of this argues with the fact that prescribing generic saves money. Just to give a general, very broad idea, for a rule of thumb, is that 30 days of a generic medication costs approximately $22. A 30-day for brand costs at minimum about $135. So one can see easily that we're looking at 5 or 6 generic prescriptions to buy for everything that is a brand. So there's an opportunity here for cost savings, and every one of the federal government, state government, private insurance, etc., have all recognized the fact that there's money here to save and to be able to deal with it. And you may want to take a look at the American College of Physicians. It was printed in their Annals of Internal Medicine in November of 2015, and it's an important one. Before we finish, and that is that there's been several people that have been arguing about the use of vitamin D. And if you had asked this question 5 years ago, you'd find that none of the physicians were prescribing vitamin D, which is an over-the-counter product that you can buy from anyone. Now, vitamin D supplementation is common. You can buy it anywhere. Vitamin D3 is very common because it's not a metabolite, and so you're dealing with a very active form of the vitamin. But then the question becomes, are you doing anything? Is there something here that's a benefit? And while there are therapeutic guidelines and minimum and maximum amounts, the question has been, has there been any value? And in the American College of Cardiology journal in April, there was the issue of, does it lengthen the walk distance in patients with chronic heart failure? So effectively, you're not dealing with the common person, you're dealing with someone who already has heart failure. Is vitamin D going to be helping them? And more importantly, and complicated in the whole process, is that, is this going to help an individual who has chronic heart failure, but also has other conditions, because you're dealing with a higher severity patient than just a low severity patient who doesn't have heart failure and is going to deal with it. And what they found is that that the vitamin D was associated with some improvement in walking distance in people with heart failure. The bottom line message for everybody here is that when people talk about association, so they talk about whether a drug is working or not working or otherwise, the most important question that has to be asked is the first question is, what's the patient population? Are we dealing with very severe people? Are we dealing with not very severe people? And what are the complications in that population? Is it a very severe that has a lot of treatment, a lot of conditions? In effect, you're not going to get a lot of benefit in certain therapies unless they have a big pharmacologic impact, or are you dealing with people that don't have as high a severity, and therefore the association can be higher, but it may be just because almost anything would be of benefit to them. That's the question. It appears that vitamin D may have some benefit in walking distance for people with heart failure, because clearly, if you have heart failure, if you walk a short distance, then you're out of breath, you have to stop, you have to hold on to something so you don't fall. But here, there may be some benefit in extending that out. Now, it doesn't double the distance, but if it can improve the distance in somewhere around 20 or 30%, then clearly there's a benefit. We'll be talking more each week. We're doing it on Wednesdays. We're trying to hold a time of about 12 noon Pacific Standard Time, but depending on client calls and other issues that we have to address, that will change what we do, but we're going to try and hold to that time. We thank everybody for taking the time to talk to us. We hope you have a wonderful week, and thank you. Stay healthy for the next week. Bye.